BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
5 Live Boxing.
Welcome to the 5 Live Boxing Podcast with me, Steve Bunce. It's been another weekend of fights. Well, one just gone and one just coming up. World Championship fights. Well, in Dubai, Sonny Edwards retained his title. And this weekend, Josh Warrington fights for his old title, the IBF Featherweight in Leeds. That'll be a special night. Josh joins me, by the way. And Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, talks to me about his life, growing up in Kazakhstan, his career, his ambitions, his next fighting dream. Well, actually, I'll be honest with you, that's a bit rich. I have a conversation with Golovkin and his translator. Don't worry, it's fun. Hey, listen, I do a good job. Stick with me, it's not bad. And a man called Jim Bentley joins me to talk about his latest film, M14, a Moss Side story. It's the raw and passionate story of Phil Martin and his boxing dream in Moss Side. It is quite an unbelievable story, one of the forgotten tales of British boxing. And joining me to talk about all of the above is, well, former two-weight world champion Carl Frampton. What a great person to have as my partner through that minefield of boxing stuff. And Carl, of course, the last time that you and I spoke, we were analysing your chances in a free-for-all against Big John Fury. Big John Fury went a bit quiet. I've got to tell you, I did reach out to him, and of course that pod, for a variety of reasons, never saw the light of day. Have you had any? Have there been any back channel chats with Big John Fury, Gypsy John? I mean, are you and him friends yet?
No, there hasn't been any chats. To be honest, the first point that you made there, I don't fancy my chances at all against Big John. But no, look, it's been made into something much bigger than what it is.
I agree.
John's just he's a passionate guy. I disagreed with my view on how I would see a fight between Tommy and Jake Paul go on, and that's it. No hard feelings really. That's it. I don't really care.
But later
I had to go and have to check the trunk, Steve, for a while.
No, listen, I thought you held your own perfectly well, but then he just got a little bit closer. With Big John, if Big John moves his bulk just 2 inches closer, it blocks out the sun, so you've got to be a little bit careful. He's got the most enormous hands and ears and neck. Don't worry. Listen, I'm pleased to say Big John's a close and good friend of mine. Carl, but what's interesting is that same day, that was part of a BT promotional day for the Dillian White-Tyson Fury fight, is you did a round table kind of heavyweight discussion, and young Tommy was with you on the table. Was young Tommy talking to you?
No, he wasn't. He tried not to, but he came in on his own, and there was 4 with me, Tris, there was Big David Price and Tommy. Yeah. And Tommy came in and shook everybody's hand.
Not yours?
No, he did shake my hand.
Oh,
I put my hand out, but it was a wee weak handshake. He didn't look up. He didn't want to do it, but he did it.
Listen, Tommy's a nice kid. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And Tommy also, no disrespect, Steve, if Tommy knows how that is being criticised in boxing, it's nothing compared to the other stuff he has to deal with, on his social media side with the old Love Island stuff, because that stuff is, I don't know if you've ever glimpsed some of the things that people say to those people. Boy, oh boy, they pay a price for their little bit of fame. Carl, we're going to speak to Josh Warrington in a moment as we build up to the Kiko Martinez fight in Leeds on Saturday, the IBF title. Martinez, of course, he's the champion again. I mean, the man's a throwback. He's beyond the throwback, Kiko Martinez.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolute throwback.
55 fights. Who loses 10? Who's lost in this modern age? Take away Manny Pacquiao. Who's had 55 fights, lost 10, and is a world champion? It just doesn't happen.
No one doesn't happen anymore. And yeah, I was delighted that he won that fight against Kid Galahad. I like Kiko, really like him. I have a lot of respect for him. It was interesting actually yesterday. I had a missed video call from a friend of mine called Johnny Drennan, who journalist, but he's in Spain, and he thought it'd be good to interview Kiko. Yeah. And it was him and Kiko on the video call, and I missed it. I'm raging. But I like Kiko and I respect him a lot, and I'm delighted that he's getting another opportunity. He's a world champion now, and he's getting another huge payday. which he fully deserves. He's, like you said, Steve, he's an absolute throwback.
It's almost like it's like 9 years of him being in big fights, or 10 years of him being in big fights, many of which he was meant to lose, which he managed to win, and others which were like this, which he managed to drag in. I mean, you beat him in the first fight. You fought him, you stopped him, which wasn't easy. It was still a hard fight. But then the rematch, which people overlook for the world title outdoors in Belfast, 78,000 people at the Titanic Centre, at least 78,000 people. Those numbers are growing each and every time I visit Belfast. That people forget how hard that fight was because you won it clearly, or you've won it fairly clearly. Up close. I mean, you were in the ring. You can't get any closer. That was a brutal fight. That rematch with Kiko Martinez.
Yeah, look, you look at my face after the fight, and although it was one-sided on the judges' scorecards, it was a tough fight, and I had to be really switched on throughout the fight because he's very dangerous. But even if we go back to the first fight, I think people forget how hard that was just because they remember the stoppies. They remember it was a KO win for me, but I was nip and tuck. And I struggled for a week or so after that fight. Like my hands were sore, my body was sore. It was a brutal, grueling fight for me.
Well, I remember the day after the Kiko fight in Belfast, and I remember walking past the hotel, and you were leaving the hotel, and I think your wife was either pregnant or she just had a child. I think she was pregnant.
She was pregnant, yeah.
And she was having to carry all the bags because neither of your hands were functioning. I remember that clear as a bell because I remember taking the bags from her. I mean, you literally had two hands that you couldn't even hold a bag. Couldn't even use a wheelie bag.
I struggled bad for about a week or 10 days after that fight. I was sore. But it was worth it.
We're going to speak to Josh in a moment, and of course, he had his own particularly hard and difficult and grueling fight with Kiko back in 2017. Fighters have bad years, Carl, and sometimes they walk away from boxing, and sometimes fighters have bad years and they recover. And I reckon that Josh Warrington's 2021 was a bad year, giving up the world title, getting stopped by Maurizio Lara, and then getting that sort of horrible 2-round cut-eye, no decision fight. Tough fights to come back from, tough year to come back from.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a tough year. It's a tough year for anybody when they lose their world title, especially when it's an unexpected loss, really. No one really expected him. No one knew much about Lara. Actually, I remember watching that fight, and I thought, after watching about 30 seconds into it, thinking, this is going to be an easy night for Josh. He looked really... Yeah, he didn't look very good, but then we seen how heavy-handed he was. Yeah. I actually remember thinking, it was one of his first fights when he teamed up with Eddie Hearn. He left Warren and teamed up with Hearn, and I was thinking, Hearn is going to get ripped apart here for this being Josh Warrington's first fight. And then we all know what happened.
Yeah.
Dreadful year for him, but it's about what happens coming back, and if he can become a world champion again, which most people would expect he will when he fights Kiko at the weekend, then he's a 2-time world champion, and there's huge opportunities again for him.
2-time world champion, and of course we've got Lee Wood down the road and all other sorts of fights floating around. So that, as you say, there are plenty of opportunities. But it's such a hard fight, and we'll talk to Josh about this because. And I don't care what you say, Carl, and I've had this argument or disagreement sometimes with boxers. Even if you're getting in the ring and you can convince yourself, you've done all the sparring, all the running, all the training, all the stats tell you that you're trained just like it's the hardest fight of your life. I'm convinced there's something, if it's not in the back of your mind, it's somewhere inside your soul, which tells you, but I know I can win. So you can say all that, but I know I can win. Now, there is so much at stake for Josh. But do you think there's just something in his head saying, well, I beat this guy once. He's not got any better. In fact, he's only got older. And since then, he's had a couple of losses. Do you think there's any danger at all that Josh could have that sort of that horrible feeling that this is going to be an easy night?
No, I don't think so. And the real reason I don't think is because the first fight was tight. It was a hard fight to score. Josh got the decision. I scored it maybe a draw or by 1 round. Josh, it was really tight. And I remember going into my fight with Kiko, with Josh, getting a lot of confidence, maybe overconfidence, thinking if he had a hard night with Kiko, I'll beat this guy. So he'll not make the same mistake that I made. And I think that he knows what's on the line here for him. He knows that people are expecting him to beat Kiko. He knows there's pressure on him, but he knows it's going to be difficult.
What I like, one of the things I like about you, and one of the things I like about Josh is that you never ever can make excuses, and you've never made excuses about when you've lost a fight or when he's lost a fight. You've lost because you've lost, and and in your case, last time out, you realised at some point that you were going to lose before it was over. And Josh last year against Lara, I think there was a realisation, probably about round 3 or 4, when he'd been clipped and hurt a few times, when he realised this is not what I signed up for. No one told me this guy had these concrete fists. You mentioned there the night that you fought Josh Warrington, and that was an intense evening, and we're going to get the same type of evening, surely. Or I know you're going to be with us as part of the Five Live team. Surely we get the same type of evening in front of his fans up there in Leeds. But we know one thing: Kiko's not fazed by that. We tried that in Belfast outdoors. He doesn't give a monkey's how many fans are there and how vicious it is. The entrance. He doesn't care.
No, he doesn't care, and I think he probably enjoys it. He enjoys getting into the Lansdowne, really, and trying to become champion, or he is champion, trying to win the fight against all the odds, against the hometown fighter. I think he likes that, and that's the situation that he's in, and he's always in. His whole career has been like that. Even when he won the world title for the first time, after I'd beat him for the European title, he went to America and fought the local guy, Jonathan Romero. He was Colombian, but he was on the local he was a local promoter's fighter, and he was the A side, and he done it in Japan as the champion. He went to Japan as the champion and beat the Japanese fighter. He came to Belfast as the champion. He travels everywhere, and he's happy to do it.
Yeah. No, you've got to love Kiko Martinez, and I just feel that if ever there was a case for a foreign fighter having a fan club in Britain, it would be Kiko Martinez.
He said, he said yesterday when he was speaking to the friend of mine that he's known in Elche, which is where he's from, in that little town, but he goes outside there and no one really knows him, and he was adamant that I am way more popular in Belfast than I would be in and around Alicante, the region that he's from.
Well, he wouldn't be the first foreign fighter to wander through the streets of Belfast a hero, that's for sure. He wouldn't be the first. And I tell you what, he won't be the last. Carl, listen, let's try and grab hold of Josh Warrington now and just get Josh's take on, well, I'm going to call it the biggest fight of his life. Josh, sorry to get you out of bed on fight week, my friend. I know you'd rather be in bed having some breakfast and watching a bit of breakfast.
It's a quarter to 11, by the way, Steve.
Yeah, but Carl, you have to understand, it's the champion's prerogative. He's getting up late these days. Josh, first of all, thanks for joining us. Saturday, Josh, I've called it the biggest fight of your life. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, most definitely. Obviously, every fight is always the biggest fight of your career, because what stage you're at, whether you're coming through at the British level, domestically, you're moving on to European, or you're knocking on to world level, every fight is always the biggest, because otherwise it puts brakes on your career. But with that being said, if you do have a slip up at domestic level, or on the way up to world level, there's always a chance of coming back. But I'm 31 now. And I know that's still pretty young, but in terms of being a featherweight, and I'm 13 years deep as a professional, I don't want to be adding another 2 years onto my career by having to go through more eliminators to get back for another title shot. Whereas I've got an opportunity to win a world title here, and all of a sudden I'm the man again, and I've got the power in my hands.
Has anything changed for you, Josh? I know that you mentioned your age there, and 31. It's not that old, but you'd be maybe in your prime years now. Have you changed the approach to training in terms of amount of rounds you sparring? Have you found out, as I did, that you get a little bit more niggles as you get a little bit older? Has anything changed?
Obviously, throughout the years, Carl, there's been the body's been through some fair old camps and training sessions, and it catches up with you like any fighter. With that being said, there has been a few little tweaks that I've done. For instance, when the first time I boxed Kiko Martinez, I did 220 rounds of sparring for that camp. Far too many.
Yeah.
This time, I think it's been about 110, and that's been perfect. You know, I've done everything I needed to do, and we've not been sparring just for the sake of it. Rest, like normally I just squeeze a day here and there. I've been having like 2 consecutive days, and that's been a massive difference. And my biggest thing, more than anything, and I wish I'd go back to an 18-year-old self and give him a slap around the face and say, listen, make sure that you stretch.
Josh,
that is
I would say
thing.
the exact same thing. As I got older, I used to struggle to put my socks on. I was a professional athlete that was fighting for world titles. I couldn't put my socks on.
Is that because neither of you had stretched, or neither of you had taken care of your body when you were 17, 18, 19, 20?
Do you know what it is, Bunce? Like, people say, oh, you need to stretch, and you need to, you stretch before you go into the gym and before you start your session, but not really focus on the emphasis of cooling down. You just want to get changed after your session, get out the door, get home, get some food. But man, mate, I spend like an hour and 45 in the living room when I get home. I'll have a warm bath and I'll just come in and stretch. And the next day I feel great. And if I don't, I notice it. I'm getting out of bed like you, Bunce. Oh,
easy.
Hey,
no, so that's where you're wrong, because I learned from the Cubans in 1996 in Atlanta when I got into a Cuban training session and I was standing against the wall, and they did their warm-up, okay, which just seemed to take about 45 minutes, no punching, just warm-up, just stretching and shadowboxing. Then they did their session, and the floor was flooded. It was flooded. But then they stretched collectively, helping each other for over an hour. And I remember watching that and thinking, there's a connection involved here.
Bunce can bite his own toenails.
He's quite comfortably. and that's back flipping. That's not even forward flipping. Oh,
what, man?
That first fight with Kiko Martinez, was there any shocks in that fight? Because it was a tight fight. It was a hard fight. One judge scored it a draw. The other 2 had it to you by 2 rounds. Was it harder than you expected, or was it what you expected, Josh?
Yeah, I always expected him to come forward and keep on putting the pressure on. I wasn't expecting my hand to go so soon in the fight. I think in the 3rd round, I hit him on top of the head with a jab, and my hand went up like a balloon, and I just lost feeling in it. I just felt like I couldn't get my range with my jab, and a little bit of ring rust had set in there as well. I'd been out of the ring for like 12 months. I'd had an elbow operation in between that. Obviously, I left with Eddie in the first time and Simon Frank, so there's a lot of that going on. And the date had changed twice. I'm probably right why I did so much sparring, because I was meant to fight in March, then it was April, then it was May. So all the factors, tied into it. But I expected a tough fight. I expected him to always be there. Within the first 2 rounds, I thought this is going to be steady. I can't miss him. But then went, and then he started to get a bit of a second wind in the mid rounds. It was a tough fight, but I kind of thought to myself, if I can get through something like that, then I can certainly go on and win a world title.
The last year, we've just been talking about it. It was a tough year for you.
Yes,
Josh. I mean, fighters have tough years, and that's what makes them. That's what builds their character. It was a tough year for you. Giving up the title, then the loss to Lara. Both of those things were kind of out of the blue, and then the unfortunate ending to the second fight with Lara, when I thought you were boxing perfectly. I mean, there's a bit of a disagreement over that. I thought, from up close, I thought you were boxing perfectly. Is Lara still someone on your radar? And I know I shouldn't ask you this because it's Martinez on Saturday, but is Lara, would you consider that unfinished business, Josh?
Yeah, most definitely. Especially when I watched the DAZN behind the scenes footage, and he's slagging me off and swearing in his native language. That annoyed me. That annoyed me, because for me on the night, it looked like he was happy to be out there. He was happy that the fight had been finished, and he's shouting, carrying on like he's absolutely goated and he's screaming. But there wasn't that kind of reaction in the ring. So, and obviously he had that win a few weeks back, and he looked devastating. But you know, it still took him 9 rounds to knock me out, and 5 of them I would have concussed. You know what I mean? So I just like to put it to bed. Mauricio Lara is a puncher, but all-round fighter. He's not a Carl Frampton. He's not a Lee Selby. He's not a Kiko Martinez. He's not a Dennis Salan. He's not none of these guys. He's not a Kid Galahad. You know, and I think that any one of them names I've just mentioned would play with him, and I feel like I was on the way to do that in that second fight. You know, we had a game plan. It was to get through the first 3 or 4 and then put it on him and lay it on. Because as you've seen a few weeks back, only into 3 rounds, he would look like he was starting to blow. He puts a lot of effort into every punch, but you can't hold that for 12 rounds. Doesn't matter who you are. So yeah, I'd love to put that to bed. I feel like a Josh Warrington switched on, beats him more like easy. But I just love that opportunity to shut a lot of people up, because you know how it is. A lot of people will say he's got your number and all this, but like I say, I'd love to put it to bed.
How's the pressure, Josh, going into this fight with Kiko? Because I think you've already beaten him, so
yeah.
People assume you'll beat him again. Although he's on, he's got a bit of trajectory behind him. He's on a good roll at the minute. He obviously beat Kid Galahad and stuff. A chance to become a 2-time world champion for yourself as well.
Yes.
Is that add a little bit of extra pressure on yourself?
Again, Cal, I think there's always pressure. You know, you boxed him twice, and you beat him quite comfortably the first time round, and people expect me to do the same. Obviously, he's 5 years older, but he's on a good run. He's got momentum behind him. You know, he pushed Shelford really close, and that knockout punch against Galahad. But you know, in them 5 years, he's got older, as have I. But I think that my stock has gone up since I boxed him the first time. You know, I went on to, like I say, box Salan, Selby, yourself, Galahad. And experience has got better and better. I've become more accustomed to them 12 rounds, and just little things like sitting down and punches, my strength. I feel like my body's in its prime position, but not only that, my mindset. So whereas when I boxed him, 5 years ago, I had a lot of pressure on my shoulders. I was chasing Lee Selby down. It was like all about the world title, and anytime you slip up, that opportunity could go. So I'm probably more comfortable than ever than I am now, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it does. Yeah,
but listen, I know that he's coming for the fight. You know, he wants that revenge. He's been screaming for my name since for the last few years. So I know he's going to bring it, but I'm ready for whatever he brings.
Will you do your thing this weekend, Josh, where you go to the venue the night before and do your walk and your visualization and get your sense fixed? So obviously, it's a venue you like. It's it's your home. Genuinely, it is your home venue. But will you still try and do that on the Friday night or the Saturday morning?
Yeah, most definitely, Steve. I mean, there's a few things what I used to do, what kind of dwindled away after getting knocked out by Lara. So I thought it's a clean slate. But yeah, things like that, just to get you comfortable, used to the surroundings, jumping at ring the night before, have a little walk around, and like I say, I've been there many, many times before, but it still gets the blood flowing, still gets excitement, and you can still get it all pictures in your mind on the night before. So I'll go in, get a feel for it, and I can take that away from me and just think about that throughout the day of the fight.
You mentioned there the fact that you turned pro 13 or so years ago, and you didn't turn pro on a big circuit. You turned pro on a small circuit, and you went English, Commonwealth, British, hard eliminators, really hard eliminators, world title fight, really hard world title fights, and then a couple of shocks last year. You're a 31-year-old veteran, Josh. It's been a long old ride, and you've not had it easy. Is it getting harder? Is the whole thing getting harder? You said that you're in the best place you've been, but is the whole thing getting harder? When you go to sleep at night, you're closing your eyes and you're going, I'm knackered tonight. Is it getting harder?
No. No, that's why I feel like I'm in my peak. Obviously, alongside the little changes what we've done throughout camp, I love it, Steve. Honestly, I love it.
Brilliant.
I've gone through this camp. Normally it gets to about 4 weeks to go, and you think we've still got these sessions to come in. We've still got them rounds of sparring to do. But I've been so eager every day. Every day has been something new, and I've been excited to go. I think the realization is, Steve, that I know it's not going to last forever, and there's going to be a day when I hang up them gloves. And I've said it many times, but if someone had said to me when I was a 10-year-old lad, "Hey, tell you what, you're going to be fighting for world titles in big arenas, headlining shows,"
get in.
I'd have gone, "What, me? Me?"
Fantasyland.
But it's I'm doing it now. I'm living the dream. So why am I not going to enjoy it? It will be a day when I can now eat whatever I want and be as large as my dad. But until that time, I'm just gonna enjoy it, and I'm loving it right now, mate. Loving it.
Will you get to that point, Josh? Will you go as big as Johnny?
You know what the missus says to me? If you do, divorce papers will be going in. So I said to her, "Listen, we'll get him in now because it's inevitable. It's going to happen. Eggs, chips, and beans every night, followed by a tub of Ben and Jerry's. It's on."
Brilliant.
Over the years when I've covered fighters, sometimes as juniors, seniors, then pros, then they've retired, then I've worked with them, and I've watched them. Listen, I'm one to speak. Don't get me wrong, but I've watched them slowly get better, bigger and bigger. And the classic example, and I'll leave you with this thought: one night with Barry Jones, who I'd seen as a sort of 48-year-old kid in the schoolboys, and then as a sort of 54 kilo and a 57 kilo amateur, and then turned pro, win a world title. Fast forward, and he goes up to about 10.5 stone. And no word of lie, one night on Box Nation about 3 o'clock in the morning, my reactions are sharp. I had to move like that because he popped a button on his waistcoat, right? At 4 o'clock in the morning, he popped a button on his waistcoat, nearly took my eye out and he shook his head, Barry Jones. He went, "That's it, man. I'm going on a diet." And he's got himself back down to something sensible. He nearly injured me with a popped button. So you're a long way from that yet, son. Trust me.
Yeah, just a little bit. Maybe I might just get massive. Oh,
yes.
I mean, there's two ways of doing that. It's like edge, like a carpet carrier, or massive in terms of big belly. So we'll see.
Right. I thought that, but you need to train. And you just don't want to train. You don't want to train anymore.
See, if you're Lennox Lewis and 6'6", you can put on 3 stone, 4 stone, and people still think you're looking good, Nick. You guys put on 10 pounds. People are walking around going, "God, you see the size of Carl Frampton? You see Josh Warrington? He's let himself go." And when people do that, that's when I do the breathing trick. I suck it in and walk away like that, waddle away. Listen, Josh, I'll see you on Thursday up in Leeds at the press conference. Thanks so much for your time.
Cheers.
Good luck, Josh. All the best.
Thanks very much. See you again.
Carl, a very relaxed, as I would expect, Josh Warrington there, but he knows exactly what's coming on Saturday night, doesn't he? He knows how important this is. And he also knows, like you found out in the Titanic Centre, how hard Kiko Martinez is second time around.
Yeah, I like what he was saying. I didn't get any feeling that he was overlooking Kiko. He thought that this was going to be an easy night. I liked what he's saying about talking about his age and how he's changed the rounds of sparring. I think that's really
so do I.
As you get older. He knows how to fight, and you sparring as to get sharp really and get your range and your distance. But I don't think you need copious amounts of rounds to spar. So he's up for it. He's up for it. I'm really looking forward to being there.
Well, he said there about the rounds. He said for the first fight in 2017, admittedly it was delayed once or twice, but he thinks he did about 220. And for this fight, it's been 110. Now, that's not a slight reduction. That's it's a 50% reduction. And you're absolutely right. I've been wondering for 35 years as I go in and out of pro gyms why guys that are experienced and are fighting for titles or defending titles are doing stuff that they maybe did years ago. And I think it's that old philosophy where you've got to train harder when you're a champion. No, you've got to train smarter when you're a champion, Carl.
And it's a sport, and you know this, Steve, it's a sport that's behind the times in terms of strength and conditioning and nutrition even. And it's a weight-making sport that's behind the times of nutrition. That's how silly boxing is at times. But all these things, they come in behind other sports, and they're a little bit more advanced than we are. And we still got these old methods that you need to be up training at 5 o'clock in the morning. You need to be doing hundreds of rounds sparring. And in my opinion, I don't think you need it. Sparring's important. It is important, especially at the start of your career. But people like Josh Warrington, he knows how to fight. He doesn't need too much of it.
And Carl, it's interesting you say that, and also Josh mentioned it there. If he was 18, he'd slap his 18-year-old self and tell him to start stretching. And I saw you get animated and say, "Yeah, you're right." If you're talking to young members of the Irish team at the moment, young 18, 19, 20-year-old amateurs, or even 20-year-old pros, do you ever? I mean, you've got to be careful what you say because you don't want to look like you're trying to influence their career. But do you ever offer advice like that about simple things like diet, like stretching, like life stuff when they're young? Do you ever offer advice like that?
I'd never offer advice, but if someone's looking advice, then I would give it. But cool. I think that was a really interesting point that Josh made, and it's something that I've said myself, that you get away with things when you're a younger man, and you don't have to stretch to be ready for the gym the next day. But as I get older, and that I wasn't being flippant when I said it, like, I used to struggle sometimes to put my socks on, and I'm a so-called world-class athlete getting ready for world title fights, and it was hurting me to put my socks on in the morning. It's mental, but so that's something I would do, and I have said it. Like, I wish I'd have taken care of my body a bit more, and I suppose stretched and looked after it more than I did.
So really, that morning after Martinez, if I'd have come up to see you, I could have challenged you to just about everything, and I would have beaten you at everything. Isn't that great?
Yeah, everything.
Press-ups, everything. Handstands, tiddlywinks, Monopoly, anything we did, I would have beaten a no-armed Carl Frampton. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. What I love, and especially tying your shoelaces. I know you're with me on Saturday night. It is a tough old fight, but just. I don't really want to do predictions this early in the week, but Josh focused, Josh doing what Josh does, which is a mix of very smart boxing and aggressive when it needs to be. He could become a double world champion on Saturday, couldn't he? Yeah,
look, I expect him to be, and I think that I don't think it's an easy fight, and I think I think that, but I do think he's a favourite going into the fight, and rightfully so. I think that. Yeah, it's a huge opportunity, isn't it, Steve? A two-time world champion. There's not many people can call themselves a world champion, but to call yourself a two-time world champion is huge, and the fights off the back of it and the money off the back of this are huge as well. I fancy him to win the fight. I like both guys in the fight, so it's one of them where I have real respect for both of them. I just want to see a good fight. Hopefully, both of them are getting well paid. And hopefully no one comes out in a bad shape.
Absolutely right. I echo those sentiments. So Josh Warrington fighting for his old title, the IBF featherweight title, in the Leeds Direct Arena on Saturday night against Kiko Martinez. And I'm going to say this, the great Spaniard, and I really mean that, the great Spaniard. That's live and exclusive on 5 Live. Carl Frampton will be ringside with me. Carl, I spoke to Gennady Golovkin last week. Well, I spoke with Gennady Golovkin, who understands what you say, but we still went through a translator, and it was an awful lot of fun. He's fighting Ryota Murata in April. In fact, the day before the fight, he turns 40. And Golovkin, his record, you read it, you look through Golovkin's record, you look through your fingers at the amount of fights and the amount of damage he's done, the sequence of stoppages, just how brilliant he was and how brilliant he still is in some ways, and how many big fights he was in. Anyway, I caught up with Golovkin, and I put it to him that it was, a tough old fight.
I totally agree with you. Of course, it's going to be a hard fight, and his achievements speak a lot about him. He's a former Olympic champion. He's the current super champion, WBA, and it says a lot about him. He is a solid fighter.
Gennady, you are 39 now. How do you motivate yourself? How do you get up? You have been in so many big fights. You have won so many titles. What is your motivation?
I think it's my stupidity and stubbornness. No, I'm just kidding. In fact, it's It's about me being able to continue to be in shape, to be able to peak, to get to the top of the form. I feel it inside of me that I can do that, and that's why I continue.
Do you watch films of your fights from 2006 when you are in a small venue making very little money? Do you look at that and shake your head? Because it is so strange. It is like two different Gennadys. The Gennady then and the Gennady that we know now, the superstar.
I think it's been a very organic process, like developing from something small scale, and I've never been ashamed to get out in the ring in a small venue, for example. And of course, I'm always I'm happy with where I am right now. But it's been part of the process. It's been the journey, and I enjoyed every part of it, and I value every step of that journey.
Does the journey have to have a third fight with Canelo Alvarez? Does it have to have a third fight with Canelo?
You know, I hear a lot of like must and have to. I don't see it that way. And if it does not happen, life will go on.
Finally, with life going on, you're nearly 40, Gennady, and I think you fight for a few more years. But close your eyes. In 10 years, what are you doing? Are you walking in the Kazakh mountains? Are you swimming in the ocean? What are you doing in 10 years' time?
Well, I might look like a crazy person being in boxing for so many years, but I'm not crazy enough to make predictions like 10 years out. Even closing my eyes, I cannot answer this question. I don't know what is going to happen in 10 years.
How does he feel he will be remembered? How does he feel he will be remembered in boxing?
It's difficult for me to answer this question. I'm still active. I'm still getting in the ring. And this is not a question to me. This is a question to the fans. And it does not really matter to me what I want to be remembered by.
What will happen in the Murata fight? How will the Murata fight finish? Tell me about that fight.
It is going to be an exciting fight. It's going to be a hard fight. It's going to be a gift to the fans of boxing. Everything is going to happen in that fight. Drama is going to happen. Big drama is going to happen in that fight. Yes.
Hey, listen.
People will enjoy it, and I would also like to add that it's going arguably be the best fight of the year.
Gennady Golovkin, I put it to you, Carl Frampton, is a modern great. It's that simple.
Yeah, no, he is. Absolutely a modern great. I don't know if you would agree with this or not, Steve, but I'll ask you a question anyway. Is it almost like he's a bit of a forgotten man at the minute? It's mad to say that, isn't it? Like he's the man who pushed Canelo so close not that long ago. He's really in the who needs you club as well. Like, who wants to fight Golovkin unless you're getting an absolute fortune? He would put the frighteners onto anybody. But he's getting older. He's 40 now. They're still talking about another Canelo fight. But this Murata fight is a tough fight for him. Murata's a good fighter, tough guy. And it's just, I suppose we need to find out where Golovkin's at this stage of his career. How much does he have left at 40 years old?
Well, Murata will give us a good indication of that. And then, as you say, there is the potential in September for a Canelo third fight. Golovkin hasn't, I'm told, and he was a bit coy about it, signed the deal, but I'm sure there's the money there. Canelo has, in theory, definitely fancies it. Hey-ho, as they say. That'll be something to savour, as they say. Now, Carl, there's a documentary coming out on BT on Thursday night, made by Jim Bentley, a producer, a guy that you know very well. It's called M14, a Moss Side Story, and it basically follows a boxer called Phil Martin, who lost for a British light heavyweight title in the 70s, and a few years later found a burnt-out building after the riots in Moss Side in 1981, built a gym, created a legacy, and at one point had 4 British champions inside the one gym. It's a phenomenal documentary. And I called up with Jim Bentley a bit earlier, before you joined me, and talked to him about it. Have a listen to this, Carl, because this is a sort of film that you, as a boxing man from a boxing city, will absolutely love.
Phil Martin, local man from Manchester.
He was rewriting British boxing history.
And he was talking about the amount of talent here. And why was he no boxing club?
More like a father figure than a trainer.
Moss Side ABC, there were fighters that were overachieving.
I'm having fights, and I'm not just having fights, I'm knocking them out.
He's a haters, and I mean with a passion, he's a hater.
End of the day, they were from Manchester, they were unfashionable, they were from Moss Side, M14.
So that's the official trailer for M14, a Moss Side story. But in all fairness, M14, a Moss Side story, doesn't quite tell the story of how this film came to be made. In fact, the making of this film is something that the man at the centre of it, Phil Martin, would have loved. It took not 1, not 2, not 3. No, you don't build Rome in 3 or 4 years. It takes about a dozen years. And it takes one determined man to just keep on knocking on doors, to keep on filming, to keep believing. Well, that determined man is someone that you've probably heard me mention quite often over the last 10 or 15 years, but you've never seen him, and you're not seeing him now unless you're watching this somewhere on a phone. If you're listening to this, you're not seeing him. That man is called Jim Bentley. I caught up with Jim Bentley a bit earlier, and I started by asking him, what got him started? What led to his interest in Phil Martin and the whole Moss Side boxing experience?
Well, my first job really, Steve, in journalism or anything was on a local paper, the Burnley Express. And up there at the time, they had a couple of decent local fighters, Warren Stowe, Blue Butterworth. So I got kind of assigned to the kind of northwest boxing beat. And up there, then I'd be travelling around Stockport, Town Hall, Middleton Civic Hall, Oldham, Town Hall, Bury Leisure Centre. And every time I went to these places, this was the early 90s, sorry. Every time I turned up at these centres, these little small hall shows, there'd be these guys decked out in golden shorts. And it wasn't just that the fighters were in golden shorts, but there'd be a whole posse of supporters there in golden, you know, like tracksuits, bomber jackets, with Champs Camp all on the back. And it was the first time I was in the documentary, Billy Graham says it. It's the first time I'd seen boxing as a team. I'd always seen individuals train, individuals turn up, but this was the first time I'd seen a team turn up. And so every time I turned up, it was like, whoa, they're here again, these guys. And also with that kind of what Moss Side, you know, the reputation it had at the time, Steve, because it was a scary place. I lived around the corner in Longsight. It was a scary place, Moss Side. And so with all that, it always kind of fascinated me.
One of the things I love about the Phil Martin thing is that you got to discover and you got to find out about that massive black leather chair that he would sit in and watch films all day long. He filmed everything. He was a pioneer in that sense. And it seems to me from the clips I've seen that you've just uncovered some unbelievable archive of the boxers training back then and fighting and conversations before you've gone and tracked down the ones that are surviving.
Well, that's right. Maurice Corey, who runs the gym now, you know, I spoke to Maurice, like when I started actually trying to film this about 6-7 years ago with a cameraman you know very well, Martin Bobbin. We went up onto Manchester on our own backs just to see if this could get up and running. And we befriended Maurice, and then he showed us all these VHSs in Phil's old office. And you've seen it, Steve, this filing cabinet, There must be 400-500 VHSs in there. And I was saying to Maurice, what are all these? He said, well, look, Phil back in the day was probably one of the first guys who carried around a video recorder. And
he did.
He videoed all the as much amateur fights like the Northwest Counties, the ABAs, all, you know, loads of old shows from the small halls, and then into the professionals. He also filmed the training, you know. So there's hundreds of VHSs of this, and also a lot of the VHSs were just straight from TVs, like Tyson's Greatest Hits or whatever. But what made it easier, Steve, was you looked at all this hundreds of tapes, thinking, how am I going to get through this lot? But what Joe Gallagher had done, you know, he'd gone home every night. Because I think Maurice says Joe was like Phil's teacher's pet. And he went home and he logged every one of these tapes. Wow. So it made it easier. So you found the tape number 27. You look, there's 2 books. You look in tape 27 and there's a whole list of fights.
No way.
From what might be what counties or, of each fight against each fight. Like a lot of the tapes were missing, but so I could then pull out the tapes that seemed relevant and, just transcode them and have a look through them.
I was writing something last night for Boxing News, and I found this night, and I found my cuttings from it. And I know you and I have talked about this, and Lillis and you have talked about it, Steve Lillis and you have talked about it. But this is the most amazing afternoon evening in Oldham. You know what I'm talking about. It's 1993. And on the card, Phil has four British champions in non-title fights. He has another guy, Steve Walker, fighting for the British title. So he could have ended up that night with 5 British champions. He's also got on the bill Steve Foster, you just mentioned, Eric Noy, who works in local government now in Manchester, and Mario Culpepper, who's at the centre of so many Phil Martin and Champs Camps and Moss Side stories. And here's the most amazing thing, Jim. There's no TV and there's virtually no coverage. In what day and age that couldn't happen now? Can you imagine if a promoter now put on a show like that? It's just incredible. That didn't even go under the radar. That wasn't even acknowledging the radar. It was underground.
Well, that's the thing. Phil was, what I began to find out was so ahead of his time when he was trying to promote. Like we've said before, there was a show when he put on his show against the Bronx v Moss Side. The Sunday show, that must have been one of the first ever Sunday shows there was. And you look at the footage of that, Steve, and again, he's videoing this. This is there was probably only him and probably, I don't know, Steve Holdsworth around the time who were doing things like that, videoing show. Everything he seemed to do, like building his own gym, the training techniques, he seemed ahead of his time. And that Sunday show just kind of epitomised that, And also, incidentally, that was Mario Culpepper. I think that was his last time he ever fought. And Mario, you say, he was central to that whole Moss Side story, really.
Well, in all fairness, Jim, he's a guy that we can be careful what we say here. He's a guy that had a foot in both places, outside on the streets, and as I say now, that they were the bloodiest, most dangerous streets in the world. I think you told me a figure of 100 shootings in 1993 on those streets. And Maurice Corr, who you've mentioned, was held in strange ways. He was the British light heavyweight champion at one point. And he was a bad boy and he was targeted, and he's now a school governor and he still runs the Champs Camp in Moss Side. But at one point, Maurice was held in strange ways for 9 attempted murders. A couple of years later, he was the British light heavyweight champion. Phil knew who to have close. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think as well, Steve, that's another massive part of the story, isn't it? Because anyone who knows Manchester knows Princess Road. Champs Camp is right on Princess Road. You look across 100 yards across the road from there, that's the estate where, they were literally shooting across, they were shooting across streets from each other. You had the Doddington gang and the Gooch gang, and they were literally shooting each other for 2 years. But as in this film, it says, people say in that gym, there was never any gang trouble. People from both sides would go into that gym, box, and then go out, and they might walk back out into all that trouble that there was on the Gooch and, the Doddington estate. But out on the streets there, it was a dangerous place.
Let's talk a little bit about the boxers, Jim, themselves. Ensley Bingham, Paul Burke, Carl Thompson, Frank Grant, Maurice Corr, all British champions during a sort of 3-year period. And then what's interesting is that the men that came after Phil died in 1994, far too early. And of course, Billy Graham, who'd been a pro with Phil back in the 70s and a friend, and Phil had taken him, and Joe Gallagher, who'd boxed for Phil. Those two guys go on to create their own legendary status as the trainer of great fighters, and of course Billy Graham having Ricky Hatton. So Phil isn't just this guy that came along and built a gym from the smouldering embers of what was some sort of convenience store during the 1981 riots. He creates a legacy. So basically, from 1981, when he discovers that charred building, to today, 2022, it's a Phil Martin story.
Exactly, and both Joe and Billy, which was great to get Billy in the film, both of them say they wouldn't be where they were. They both admit in the film they wouldn't have got where they were without Phil. And like right at the end of the film, Joe just said, I wouldn't be anywhere without Phil. I owe everything to Phil.
And Jim, you managed to make several big, grown, dangerous-looking men cry. That's some feat, son, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yeah, no, at the end, Steve Morris is in tears, Joe's in tears, Eric's breaking up, our friend Steve Lillis is breaking up. I sent Joe a copy of the film. I sent Joe Gallagher a copy of the film yesterday. He says, "Go, it's still a great watch, but a hard watch. I'm in tears." Mario Culpepper I sent, and you know Mario, like we're talking about Mario, he's been shot at, lived in that area, and he sent me a text this morning to say, "Morning, Jim. Just wanted to say that the film was so powerful and touching. Some of the footage blew me away. It was brilliantly put together. I was in tears at the end, very sad." You know, and that's, you know, these are tough guys who've lived through the tough environment, you know, proper products of the environment, but in tears at the end.
You know what, Jim? That's the way we should finish this. Testimony from the men that were there, the men that were shot at, the men that trained fighters, and the men that defied odds in the shadow of Phil Martin. Jimbo, see you on Saturday in Leeds.
Yeah, will do, Steve. I'll catch you there, mate. Thanks a lot, buddy.
So the documentary M14, a Moss Side Story on BT this Thursday at 10 p.m. Listening to that, Carl, listening to Jim Bentley talking there, it reminded me when I was talking to him, it reminded me in some ways, or the whole Moss Side story reminds me a little bit of the Belfast story. You know, men that take over gyms, that once the doors are closed, nothing counts. Just all that matters is that you can box inside that gym. Doesn't matter what club you belong to, what gang you belong to, what religion you belong to. You just, once you're inside those closed doors, it's about boxing and boxing only.
Yeah, and I know all about that, being from Belfast. And we've got guys like Jerry Story, who's lauded worldwide, and my own coach and Billy McKee, Mickey Hawkins, Paul Johnson, amongst others. The list is endless, really. But I know a lot about Phil Martin as well, because of my connection with Manchester at the end of my career. And there was always talking and listening to all these stories, but they helped develop things in generations. You know, you look at Joe Gallagher and all the other coaches, Billy Graham and stuff, that have produced fighters who are now coaching as well. Ricky Hatton, the Smith brothers. It just continues, and it all starts somewhere. And for them guys, it was Phil Martin, but before that, it was someone else for him. You know what I mean? But he's a real figure and a huge name, and someone who, although I didn't meet him, I've heard the stories enough to respect him a lot.
Carl, just quickly before I let you go, and thanks very, very much for today. The weekend, you and I were together for David Avanesian at Wembley, and he did Avanesian, I suppose, exactly what we expected him to do, and it's all now a case of whether or not David Avanesian, the European welterweight champion, can get a fight against somebody that really matters. I'm not so sure it's an easy path.
No, I don't think it is, but I think he deserves it. Who defends their European title 5 times without getting a world title shot? There's not many, and he absolutely deserves it. He just blitzed Metz. I expected it to be a stoppage, but it was a 1-round demolition job. It's got to be. I know that, like, I imagine that Frank and even BT may have took a wee bit of stick about the fight, but what can they do when no one wants to fight this guy? He needs to fight. He needs to earn money. So I wouldn't criticize him in the slightest on that, but he deserves a big opportunity now, and hopefully he gets it.
And let me just say that David Avanesian, in my near 40 years of earning a living from this business, he would be in the top 3 world-class fighters who were avoided. I mean, not just, avoided now. I'm putting him in history as one of the most, as you say, Carl, who defends a European title 5 times? 6 European title fights, 6 stoppage wins, okay? Good wins against good fighters. Metz had no option, no chance. I'll acknowledge that. This guy's in his prime right now. He needs a shot. He needs something. And that whole list, and there are really good welters out there. No one's falling over themselves. In fact, quite the reverse. They're on record as saying they don't fancy it.
I haven't heard anyone say his name. I want to fight David Avanesian. No one said it. No one. You talk about Golovkin being the forgotten man. He's the forgotten man of Europe and the welterweights.
The two of them together would be brilliant if they boxed in a tournament together somewhere like I don't know, somewhere like Kazakhstan in 19 whatever. That could happen. Anyway, Carl, I don't know if you caught up with it, but Sonny Edwards defended his world title. Three world title fights in 11 months. For Sonny Edwards defended his world title over the weekend in Dubai. I thought he won very, very clearly. One or two of the judges thought it was a little bit closer. I put it to you, Carl, that Sonny Edwards, I know he's outspoken. I know he's sometimes a pain in the jacksie, but He's an exceptional little fighter.
Yeah,
he's an
he is,
exceptional fighter.
And he is outspoken, but never to me. He's all right to me.
Yes, and to me, thankfully. Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, I want to stay on his good side. So.
Everyone should.
But he can really fight, and he showed something that we haven't really had to see at times in that last fight against Wasim, where he had to dig in and fight and grit it out, and he was hit more than he normally gets hit.
Yes.
But it just showed a different side to himself. But I, like you, had him comfortably winning the fight.
Yeah.
But his fights are usually a lot more one-sided than that. Yeah. But this is what happens, a world title fight against a good fighter. You expect that it's not going to be easy all the time.
Now, he beat Pakistan, Dubai-based fighter called Mohammed Wasim. And in all fairness, that's 3 world title fights in 11 months, all gone 12 rounds. I think there's a case for him. There's a case to be made for those 36 rounds that perhaps really might have only lost 2 or 3 of the entire 36 rounds. Yeah, Sonny Edwards, we support you. And if you don't follow Sonny on social media and you're squeamish, don't start following Sonny on social media. But if you like a good laugh and if you like someone responding, then Sonny Edwards might just be the man for you. So, Carl, we're together on Saturday. I look forward to seeing you up in Leeds for what will be, I think it's going to be a very good night, a very lively night, and hopefully a triumphant night for Josh Warrington.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the atmosphere that's always created in Leeds. I'm looking forward to seeing 2 fighters who I respect a hell of a lot, putting it all on the line, and just, may the best man win.
Thanks very much, Carl. I will see you on Saturday. Now, I've got an email here, and I'm just going to go through it because I think it sums up how many, thousands of people feel at the moment about boxing. It's from Daniel Ward, and he writes, 2 weeks after believing I was done with British boxing, and I certainly only had a passing interest in the sport and not an addiction, we get what I will undoubtedly say is one of the greatest fights to have ever taken place on British soil. Wood against Conlon. I'm back addicted, even if the scoring still needs massively sorting. Well done, Daniel. I think you've summed up how thousands of people feel. Well, it's been a good week. Last week, every week's a good week. This week's going to be even better. We have a live show on 5 Live, 8:30 to 9 o'clock on Friday, and then the fight from Leeds, Josh Warrington, Kiko Martinez, the IBF Featherweight Championship of the World. That's from 10 p.m. on Saturday. Thanks to Jim Bentley to come on and talk about his film M14, A Moss Side Story. That goes out on Thursday night on BT at 10 p.m. Thanks to Gennady Golovkin, Andy's translator. It was a fantastic interview. Thanks to Josh Warrington for giving us some time. Thanks, of course, also to Carl Frampton. And thanks to all of you for still listening, downloading this podcast. I'm Steve Bunce, and this has been the 5 Live Boxing Podcast.
Let's get ready to rumble! 5 Live Boxing.